All right, welcome back from break. We're going to continue with our co-sensing, with some stories this morning. So I'm going to begin with a bell. To bring us into presence, to bring us back from the break, bring us back from the somatic geography, the bioregional breakout groups. So I'll ring the bell once, we'll come into presence together, inviting us back into our time together, inviting us to open our senses, to open into open heart, open mind, into deep listening. All right, so we're still in our co-sensing time of our journey. We sensed into our geography, our ancestry, our places of special meeting, the language and indigenous history of California, and then our bioregion. Just a reminder that for some of those ideas for ecosystem restoration projects, those needs and those resources that you were able to share in your groups, we're trying to capture them with Brennan's beautiful California map back there. So remember to bring those that you shared to that space there. And also to hold them as threads and ideas to continue with our conversations later this afternoon and tomorrow morning as we move out of the U into action. So for right now, we're staying in co-sensing, we're staying in observing with an open mind and open heart, and we have some stories of ecosystem restoration work around the world. So as you listen, we're going to stay open, we're going to stay seeing what are the potentials that want to emerge, what are the greatest points of interest for you or for us, and we'll have each talk and then a little bit of time for Q&A afterwards. I'm going to let Hannah introduce these folks because Hannah knows them all well and their work. Hannah.
You're all so amazing, everybody who's here. I wish we could all share our stories and tell what we're doing, but unfortunately this weekend we only have time for 4 people to do that. And so I handpicked some of our leaders in this ecosystem restoration movement. And if you'll allow a little bit of creative interpretation, we're going to still follow the theory U with this and with our presentations. And first we're going to hear from John Liu, whose over 25 years of work and scientific research has really helped capture not only the problems that our ecosystems are facing worldwide, but the solutions, and is a bit of the brainchild behind the camp's idea. And how do we come together and do this great, ever important work that everybody depends on for their survival, but how do we do it having fun and working together and rebuilding community? And so we're very fortunate to have John here in his world travels to be with us this weekend. So we'll hear from him, then a few minutes of Q&A from him afterwards. So think of your questions. And then we get to journey through and hear from his collaborator Erin, who is on the board of directors for the international organization that John works with in this work. And she's just coming back from Mexico, where they just established a new camp there. And so we're really fortunate to get to hear the fresh update from that. And then Matthew Trum, who has been helping spearhead this movement here in California after the devastation in Butte County from the Camp Fire. And so really time to come to action and start this restoration work. And then Michael Nichols has come down from Salt Spring Island in British Columbia to share with us his amazing work around the world. Where can we go with this? How can we really be inspired to take this home to all of our areas? And he's been doing some amazing work in Africa as well as other places around the world, and has really been thinking about us here specifically in California. And so we're really fortunate also to get to hear from him. So when we do the Q&A, because we are really tight on time, I ask that you please do actually keep it to questions. There'll be more time for dialogue later on, and so just really concise questions that then they will repeat, because we are videotaping this, and then we'll get a lot more juices flowing that way. So thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
Well, thank you very much. I have to overcome my basic shyness in order to address you, but I'll do my best. That's a joke. I just put here, so I've been studying function and dysfunction in terrestrial ecosystems. And I started because the World Bank asked me to film a baseline study for the Loess Plateau. So this is my academia page. And I'm a visiting fellow at the Netherlands Institute of Ecology, as well as the ecosystem ambassador for the Common Land Foundation. So you can go here, and there's 49 films, 26 papers, and press reports and all kinds of stuff there. So I just want to say that because I'm not going to show you too much stuff, because you could end up binging, and then I would be told my time is up. And we're here because of the idea of the ecosystem restoration camps. And sometime, I'm not even sure the date anymore, but I was reminded by an interviewer that it was the date 2016 or 2017. And I think what happened was this Facebook group went up in 2016 sometime. And instantly thousands of people, there are over 16,000 people now on this group that have been talking about these things and posting lots of interesting projects from all over the world. But we started to talk about this, and we said, well, we should make camps. And then we said, well, how would we do that? How would we pay for it? And then when 1,000 people on this site said that they would donate 10 euros per month, that's 120 euros per year each. When 1,000 people said that, we said, okay, we'll start a foundation. But we hadn't collected any money. So then a young man who is now the chair of, or the what does he call it? He's the chairman of the supervisory board, Francois anyway, he's Belgian. He's Belgian and has an interesting name. And he's also connected to some very interesting families, and he's a great engineer. But he said, I'm getting married. And he and his wife decided that they didn't want any presents from their guests, that their guests should donate to create this foundation. So this foundation was created by love. So I think that's a good sign. So then we started talking about like, well, where should we build the first camp? And I happened to go to Spain about this time with the Common Land Foundation, which has a 20-year project there, which covers about 1 million hectares. And I'm out there in Spain, and there's nobody there. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, all the restoration that I've ever seen had people. You know, I mean, that was one thing that was always the same, was that there were people who were doing it. And here there's nobody, so how are you going to do that? And I said, what about a camp? And a young man who is an interesting character in his own right, he's the second son of the Marquis in this place and has a huge piece of land. He said, oh yeah, you can put a camp here. And so he said, all right. And we started a process which made an agreement. We're paying a big rent. It's €1 per year to put the camp, but it's allowed us to learn a lot about this. And I think this is one other thing that's interesting, because there was a lot of talk about like who owns the land and, you know, what are we getting? What's in it for me? And I have the feeling we have to let that go. That there are people who are wealthy and there are people who are poor. And we're all equal. And we all got here, we were all born, and we're all going to die. And I think we better think about the historical developments that have happened and treat them with compassion. But we have to create the future, not obsess about the past. We have to be absolutely clear when inequities have taken place. But it's not for blame and retribution, because that just keeps the cycle of revenge and war going. We have to look at the future and say, let us all live in peace, and let us all have functional ecosystems. So Spain. So then we created the camp in Spain. Now, I highly recommend that you go to Ecosystem Restoration Camp Altiplano. And there, it's a Facebook page which is run by the campers. So this is their story, who they are, what they have done, and I think about 100 people have now been through this camp. And it's interesting. So, there's some people here who have been to this camp. Erin, I've been there. There's some other people who have been there, so they can also tell you a lot about it. But essentially, when we said Spain, the strangest thing happened. People started showing up in this place. It's amazing that they could even find it. But they all just went there and they said, okay, we're here. And it's like, the camp is, what? And then, so they built the camp. They went there and they built the camp, and read and listen to their stories. They videotape some of their stories, and it's wonderful because they know what they're doing. It's a conscious decision. They're PhDs who left research tasks to do this, and they like it better. So think about it. And, the information is here. I'm not going to dwell on this. This is the vision that we put up. Let me read it. We envision a fully functional, peaceful, abundant, biologically diverse Earth, brought about through cooperative efforts for the ecological restoration of degraded lands. This is a good vision because I don't think it's possible to not agree with it. So we don't want to make it more complicated. We want to make it very simple. We've talked about our mission to work together to restore ecological functionality through infiltration and retention of all available rainfall and moisture, fertile organic soils, and returning complete vegetative cover of trees and grasses to designated areas, and to build research, training, and innovation centers for ecological restoration, to engage people in inquiry into ecological restoration, to train people in existing techniques, and for the innovation of new techniques for restoring degraded lands in perpetuity. This is the paradigm shift, which changes the direction that human civilization has been going in. Our principles and values. We believe that all beings are equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights. We voluntarily, joyfully, and with peaceful intent wish to restore basic ecological function so that all people and other living things can live together in harmony. We choose to work together to restore the fundamental ecological integrity of the earth and to train large numbers of people to do this so that methods learned can be adopted throughout the world. So I like this because in debating, it's really nice to take a position that has no other side. So this is a position that you cannot take the other side. If you choose to take the other side, you are ridiculous. Because you're saying, well, I prefer pollution, or I don't care about other people, or I don't even care about my own children and future generations. Well, let's get with this and make sure that there's no way to take the other side. This is like flat earth, round earth. This is round earth. And flat earth is let's go shopping. So let's go camping is better than let's go shopping. There's a beautiful essay that was published in Permaculture Magazine. I highly recommend that you read that because it's a narrative vision. I don't want to spend much time on that. I don't know how much more time I have. I have 7 minutes, I'm told. So I just want to show you this. Now, I'm going to spend just a moment talking about this because I won't be able to go too deep. But you see this? What do you see? Yeah. So how did that happen? Is that a natural phenomenon? I've been studying this for a long time, and there is an edge. So I've noticed in study, when you open one door and you go through that door, the amazing thing is there's another door. And so I have been to about 90 countries around the world. And in those countries, I've seen that biodiversity biomass, and accumulated organic matter are the factors that are the difference between functional and dysfunctional systems. And that these are dynamic and that they can be changed. And this is the edge of the research at the moment. So I just wanted to show you, what does that look like to you? It looks like a heart to me. This is not the Loess Plateau. This is in the land of milk and honey. And this is the cradle of Western civilization, the prime real estate that all the Middle Eastern cultures vied over. And there's something quite extraordinary about this when you look at the secondary data. This is Mount Catherine. I'm sure it has another name. This is probably the name from the Crusades, but I'm sure it has another name. I'm not sure what that name is. And when you study secondary data, you find out that thousands of years ago, over evolutionary time, the direction of the pollen, the biodiversity, learning this from core samples of the soil, show that the biodiversity was coming from the Indian Ocean and flowing north over this area. Now that's an interesting phenomenon because that moisture is also, that means moisture is also coming from the Indian Ocean, which is a very active part of the world. And about 8,000 years ago, it seems to have stopped. And that suggests that the wind changed direction and started going south over the Indian Ocean. And what's interesting about this is that we learned a lot about, that's not the right one, but we learned a lot about these thermal drafts. When we devegetate a region, we're changing the temperature differentials. And the temperature changes cause wind, and wind speed, and wind direction, and vortex activity. So when you think about this, how did this switch? And what does that mean? So if you cause these thermal drafts to drive the moist air into the upper atmosphere, it will not rain. There is a critical mass which is required for precipitation. We're also looking in how to precisely discuss critical mass and precipitation. And this should be common knowledge around the world. But what's happening is, apparently, this creates a vacuum. So it creates a sucking of the moist air. Instead of coming in from the Indian Ocean, is leaving. And if you play that scenario forward 8,000 years, this is the result. Imagine if you could turn the wind around. Imagine what this would do. So we think that this is an acupuncture point on the Earth. I think there are many. If you look at a acupuncture charts, there are many acupuncture points. But this is an important one. And I think this is like the Loess Plateau in China. And to restore this is extremely dramatic. This is the Continental Divides, all the Continental Divides in the world. There's more, but my time is up and I want to save time for questions. Is that happening now?
Yes.
So thank you for listening to me. That was not a full explanation of that. Who wants to ask a question? I see someone.
How much money and resources do you get? I'm John. How much money and resources do you need to begin to school that hard? You know, what kind of camps do you need? What's the minimal viable cost of prototype?
Camps are not necessarily the first plan. I think the first phase of a restoration, which is now being negotiated with the Egyptian government, with several European governments, with several international agencies, is, I believe, $350 million or euros. I'm not sure which. Yes. I would say that, yes, what's the difference between biomass and accumulated organic matter? I would say that biomass is living material. So it's either plants or animals, or it could be microbes or fungi. There's a lot of biomass. Decaying organic matter, I would call the exact term. No, don't put that there.
Okay.
It's too weird.
Well,
It's hot. It will burn your thing and destroy the machine. Sorry.
okay, right. I'm
Broke-
just trying to video. I'm just trying to see you for the video. Moving on.
What was I talking about? Okay, yes. Thank you. The difference between biomass and accumulated organic matter, there is another term that I would state for accumulated organic matter. It is necromass. So necromass is directly analogous. Having spent some time in research places, this is not a term which is in favor with ecology right now. For me, it's a much better term. If you're interested in science issues, I don't think there are any ecosystem services at all. They don't exist. There's only functional ecosystems. I also notice that, well, there are many of these issues. Climax equilibrium is another one that they don't talk about. We need to talk about climax equilibrium. We need to understand that evolutionary outcomes reach a climax, and that we're not seeing that because we've disrupted the systems. But if we align human behavior with evolutionary outcomes, at some time in the future, there will be, again, climax equilibriums. We need to understand that. More questions? Yes. What happens after the camps? That's a good idea. That's a good question. I would say that the camps are the next step for us, because they allow us to ensure that a very large population of the world could have the basic understanding that is required to restore ecological function. If we fail at this, well, let's not go there. So I think the fact is, after the camps, it could be that it is land trusts or eco-villages. But right now, if we go to the eco-villages, you can spend the rest of your life trying to make one eco-village work. And somebody will sleep with somebody, and it will all fall apart. You know? So let's, Just saying, you know. But let's date before we marry. So let's go to camp and learn all the skills necessary. And when you take those skills, and when you know how to control the water, when you know how to grow organic soils rapidly, when you know how to propagate and plant out indigenous and endemic plants, you're ready to go to either continue to teach people in camps all over the world or move to land trusts and eco-villages. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, and do I believe in ocean ecosystems or only terrestrial ones? We have Dr. John Todd on our supervisory board. We are working on edge systems primarily to cross over from the ocean to the so, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there. I don't think it's up to me to decide how this is done. I think it requires collective intelligence. And so if we all go to camp and we all work together, we can all share our understandings and we can all grow. Anybody else? Yeah. Well, I think we're in a good space today here at the Paicines Ranch. So I think California could move rapidly forward. 6 weeks ago I was in India, and in India there's interest to do this. So India could move forward. They have the Guinness Book of Records for the most trees planted and that sort of thing. So if they get into it in a real big way. But you know, I would say it's urgently needed that we have both local activities but a global network, because we cannot solve this locally. We have to work locally, but we have to do this on a planetary scale, and we have to do it fast. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. You probably need to ask Ellen or someone else. Yeah. Ellen, put your hand up. Help her. Can I have one more question then? Okay. Okay, all the way in the back. Who are the kind of folks that are on the board of directors? I'm going to defer that to Erin, because she's on the board of directors. You can look on the website. It has all of the I am for full disclosure, I am the voluntary chairman of the advisory council for the camps movement, and I am an advisor to the supervisory board. And the types of people the Peter Vanden Gogh was the head of the Natural Capital Initiative. Jan Hein van der Hofen is a landowner and a photographer and a conservationist. The chair is Francois de Koenigen. Yeah, and he's on the website, and he is a environmental engineer. And there's Jane Wugasa Frazier is a permaculture trainer and project developer in Kenya. And, you know, so, I mean, if people want to stand up and be on the supervisory board, they're certainly welcome for this thankless task, but so everybody who feels keen to do that, talk to Erin. Okay, so thank you very much. I think my time is up, and Erin is coming. Bye, everybody. I think she wants to connect her computer. She wants to connect her computer.
She's got it.
She's got her device.
And then next we'll go back and do yours afterwards.
Me? What?
John, can we start with your photo? Because I would
Which photo?
to get them.
Oh my gosh. Oh gosh. Just a minute.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Meet your neighbor if you haven't met your neighbor yet.
And then will you be using your computer?
Yeah.
And what kind of outputs does it have? Does it have HDMI? Okay,
Yeah, it's HTML.
perfect.
Is that yours on?
Yes.
Here for now, and then maybe we can just pop the cord over.
Let me know.
I don't have that much.
Okay, good.
I just have 2 slides to share.
You got it.
Heavy metals, cadmium, mercury. So what is it they do there? Restore that through biological processes? Yes. I think the guy that was talking about John Todd, I just saw him. He talks about processing heavy metals.
All right, then. If we could come back to our seats, maybe do a quick little stretch. Yeah, thank you, Colleen. Everybody, all right. All right. Coming back, and now we get to hear a little more details about the camps to really keep us inspired as we go into our co-sensing now. Let's sense how we would imagine being at a camp and what this would feel by getting some real stories about what's going on from Erin. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your weekend here in this group. I've been observing the planning team process for this for the last 5 months, 6 months, something. Really amazing work that the planning team has been doing to open this space for everyone. That's been a really inspiring opportunity for me to observe, and something that I hope to take to additional work in other places. My name is Erin Beasley. I have a day job at an organization called Conservation International. There I focus at the very global scale of climate policy. So I participate in the UN climate negotiations. My role there is primarily to support national governments in tropical, to support national governments primarily in tropical countries where Conservation International has country offices, in order to have the technical information to advocate for the prioritization of nature as a climate action. So that takes up about 40 hours of my week. And with my spare time, I've been volunteering for the last 2 years with ecosystem restoration camps. So I think we've got the global scale is really important under the Paris Agreement. We really need countries to be taking ambitious action related to climate change. We know that nature plays a very large role in that action at the global scale. Around 30% of the emissions that we need in order to stay within the 1 to 2 degree limit come from the land sector. So that includes things like forests, coastal areas, peatlands, and also working lands like agricultural landscapes. So that global information is really important, but at the same time, at the end of the day, the actions that occur on the landscape are taken by the people who are inhabiting that landscape, and the social and political decisions that are made on that landscape, wherever you are in the world, right? So bringing that to the action level, getting people involved in their landscapes is really essential to be able to achieve these larger planetary ambitions that we might collectively aspire to, right? So we need to have our hands in the dirt. The work actually has to happen on the ground, in addition to the recognition of this scale. So I think that ecosystem restoration is one really important way for that to happen. And I also think that personally, radical inclusion is an important part of connecting people to themselves, to their communities, and to the landscapes that they live in, to the ecological component of their life. So I came across this organization as a complete outsider and just really resonated with the values that were already important to me. And I decided that that's where I wanted to spend my energy and personal resources to help that move forward. I could spend some time starting my own organization, but I also really like working with a group of people who are already moving forward. And I find a lot of personal value in that. So that path 2 years ago had led me to be a part of the supervisory board for ecosystem restoration camps. And I can explain to you a little bit about how the organization works and some of the activities that I've participated in through that. So the way that we generally tend to organize our work is that we're a member-based organization, right? And that means that the people who are making decisions in most levels or parts of the organization are members of ecosystem restoration camps. There are also people who don't participate that actively, but think that ecosystem restoration is really important, and so they may participate financially through their membership, or they may use some of the resources, the information resources or communication platforms that we're setting up. But I think that that's an important way of describing the work that we do. It's a little bit different than a normal nonprofit structure. So that means that at the supervisory board level, we've been trying to work to sort of set some of the strategic goals and the type of activities that we want to prioritize broadly. But at the same time, we really think that a lot of this motion and movement is going to come from people who are already sort of ready to take on restoration activities or have been doing restoration activities for decades or centuries and want to stand under that same umbrella in order to recognize that they're not just doing their project on their own, that there is a broader set of players, of individuals, of communities who think that this is important, and to not feel like we're trying to take on a task that is so big, but to really feel like there is motion and support behind that. So if you have additional questions about how this organization is structured, I'm happy to answer those. But I wanted to spend the rest of the time just describing some of the experiences, two of the sites where we've been doing some of the work and what it's been like to participate in those two spaces, to give you some brainstorming opportunities, and really remembering that because a lot of this work comes from the landscape, we have been trying to, as best as possible, to respond to proposals that come out of those landscapes as opposed to trying to create a recipe for success. I know that can be a little bit challenging because people just want to have an answer of how to fix this, right? But at the end of the day, each place is so different, even though some of the patterns of degradation might be similar. The social climate, the mental climate, the ecological climate is distinct in each place and really needs to be sustainable within itself. So these are two examples. The first would be the camp in Spain. So I was able to join them for the first time in 2017, and it is far, far away. A couple of other people have also been at that camp who are in the room here. Maybe you could raise your hands. Cool. Got some folks over here. So they can also tell you a little bit about what that experience was like. You drive across this landscape, and it feels hollow. I've never seen a landscape that has caused that response for me. They till the land 8 to 10 times per year. I just want to say that one more time. They do active tilling of each parcel 8 to 10 times per year. So when any tractor is going across that land, there's just this big dust cloud that's following behind it. And so there's something a little bit wild and ill-advised to go to the worst places to start with. But I think also something exciting in that challenge. And so seeing the folks who were living at the camp, I just visited for a couple of days in 2016 and then again in 2017. It's really amazing to see this group of people who have brought a catalyst of excitement and hope to this really barren landscape. These are farmers who are surviving on a very, very tiny percentage of income that's allowing them to do their farming year after year. Even though this is part of their culture, this is part of their identity, this is part of their heritage. And so breaking out of that cycle is both scary to them and also they're at a point where they don't see a lot of future in farming. Everyone has left. The town is almost or completely empty. A lot of the buildings where the camp is were built 400 years ago, 500 years ago, and many of them are in ruins. And so for the people in this area to see a group of wild people who want to do regeneration in this space has been quite inspiring to them. So we had thank you. And these folks, have decided, like John said, to live in pretty basic conditions, eat absolutely delicious food, make their own type of, sort of social friendships, and mini community in order to actually accomplish that work, which is really great. So I do want to give a shout out to the people who are doing that daily work, whether they're at the camp in Spain or doing that some other place. So if you guys could give a quick round of applause to them, I'd really appreciate it. So the camp in Spain has gone through this process of having absolutely nothing there, literally no water, no vegetative cover, no buildings, no plumbing, to actually being a place where people can come and gather. In 2018, they hosted a festival called the Regeneration Festival. It brought people in from all different countries, and one of my favorite moments at that event was when all of the grandfathers arrived with their cuatro guitars. This is a traditional Spanish guitar. And they hadn't really been present in this space. There was music. We had been doing restoration activities, camping, making new friends, all kinds of social social activities. And these guys all showed up. Basically, they're the farmers, right, from all the neighboring areas. And they came and just had this huge circle of maybe 40 people, each with their guitar, with this really awesome traditional Spanish jam session, basically. And for them to show up really meant to me that people are watching that space. They know what's going on there. They value it, and they want to reflect that through their own culture and identity. And I think that to me was a really nice signal that there's interest and attention in that space. Just to quickly give you the second spot where we've been doing some activities, the camp in Spain was literally ground up. Our second challenge as an organization was to try to use a partnership model to really respect and move quickly with organizations that have been doing restoration in different places in the world. So our first partner here is an organization called Via Orgánica. They're associated with an organization called Regeneration International. They've had this site outside of San Miguel de Allende, which is approximately 4 hours northwest of Mexico City. It's also a very arid landscape. It's funny how these kind of tend to look the same. And they've been working there for about 10 years to do both organic vegetable market production as well as some additional restoration activities on the periphery of their property. So we were able to join them for 2 weeks. We had a group of people that you can see here, which includes the staff and participants who teamed up for 2 weeks to do an intensive camp that included a whole range of restoration activities. So we were planting magueyes, a type of cactus called the nopal. We were also working with a local leguminous, an endemic leguminous tree, mesquite or mesquite or algarrobo, and working with these different perennial trees and plants in order to do some of the first steps of restoration on their land, compost production, seedling production, sprouts, a whole range of activities. So both learning, but also very importantly for ERC, for the ecosystem restoration camps idea, really putting those restoration activities into practice at the camp. Those are the two descriptions of the experiences that we've had so far. I'm happy to add a little bit more, but wanted to give you guys maybe a little more detail of the spaces. So, yeah, please let me know if you have additional questions. Great question. So I'll try to repeat the question. So basically, how has our decision-making structure been informed by worker-owned cooperatives. Is that no? Worker self-directed nonprofits. Yeah. Yes. Which are awesome. Yeah. And then the second part of the question was related to how have other activities and movements that have included people living together informed how we're kind of looking to set up the camps. Yeah, of course. So the way that we first started our decision-making process was through sociocracy. We found that we needed to make some adjustments because there was a kind of initial process that became very repetitive, where we were just talking about the same decisions that we had already made. And we really wanted to make sure that we were getting to work on the ground. So we kind of took the sociocracy idea, and I won't get into the details of the different types. You guys can look them up and we can talk about it more. We took the sociocracy idea and sort of melded that with a holacracy idea, which is basically that the people who have the most stake in the outcome should lead the decision-making process, and then there's kind of a consensus component of that. Which is why, for example, Ecosystem Restoration Camps is not calling this meeting. So there are folks who have a real interest in restoration in California. Those are the people who are calling this meeting. And so that stake, we think, is really important. We want this to also succeed and find ways where we can be helpful as well. But it really has to come from the landscape level and the people who are involved. And then, so most of our group has come out of Europe. I would love for us to have more U.S. perspective in some of the work that we're doing. So if anybody does want to get involved, we're going to have an opening for a supervisory board position, like a call, fairly soon. So if people want to apply for that position, that's wonderful. It's voluntary, you don't get paid, and you get to spend a lot of time on Zoom meetings with really amazing people. And so I don't think that many of our recent sort of U.S. or Western Hemisphere focused movements have influenced our decision-making process to this point. But it's not quite the normal nonprofit structure because of that focus on sociocracy, holacracy, and trying to get more people involved through membership in the decision-making process. Sure, so that would really similarly come out of the request from the site, right? This particular site said that this is what would work well for them to start to build that partnership relationship. So we're not moving in together on the first date, but we're actually they invited us to partner with them to create that 2-week, we called it sort of a PopUp Camp. And that's what made sense for that site. They have a long history of working there. They have an all-local staff. So they really drove the agenda and the activities that we did and the restoration activities that we did on the site. And what we brought in was basically sort of the ability to reach a large audience and to bring volunteers to the site, which really I think gave a lot of solidarity and inspiration to the team as well, which is really awesome.
What are some of the benefits and challenges of partnering with an existing organization here and then somebody not functional versus
So for us, doing the Altiplano piece was really about ensuring that we could show real impact with something that we were leading as an organization. It takes a fair amount of startup energy, money, a lot of initial questions to get to that infrastructure moment where you can be taking in volunteers. We really think that if we want to go far and fast, a partnership model is really going to be essential to the organization, and we're trying to grow as quickly as possible in order to do that, as well as to honor the work that so many other organizations have put into restoration.
So there's Altiplano from the ground up partnership with an existing organization. I would encourage people to consider that all types of my question is, what is it right now the current role that camp play for personnel, providing people, marketing? What is right now the way that we can help coordinate this project? How do we approach doing
Sure. So the simplest answer to that is like mainly that's what you guys are here to figure out about how you want to do stuff. We have a form on our website that a potential site could fill out, but a site could mean many different things, right? A site could be an individual with land, a site could be a coalition of people who have decided to work together in a specific region. There are as many options as you could imagine. What Ecosystem Restoration Camps does, and John can also add to this, is to connect sites with each other under that umbrella, individuals with potential restoration sites so that they can get their hands dirty, as well as sites with each other. Did I say that? Yeah. To share information and knowledge and learning that's happening in this mycelial network of efforts.
So while Joan's speaking with Matthew, if you could come up and we could set up your laptop. We're ready for Thank you.
I've been thinking about that particular question for some time, and I think that there are 5 areas that the international movement can help local areas. First of all, by any local project or any local camp that joins with this officially as a ecosystem restoration camp with the global movement instantly is just discussed worldwide. Second, we have found 2 things that we found. If we don't want to own land, we just want to restore it, that there's vast areas of the planet which are offered to us to do restoration. And the other part of that is there seem to be unlimited numbers of people who want to go, and if they can have a place to stay and 3 meals a day, they want to do restoration. And if we can find some ways to find universal basic income or something for these people, then they're going to have millions and millions of people doing restoration. It's going to create a new civilization. Third, the third thing is we have a board, it's an advisory council. I'm the chair of the advisory council. Brock Dolman just joined us. We have the CEO of Common Land Foundation. I see some other people who should be on this Advisory Council. And there are many. Go look at it. It's on the website. And so I think that when we have problems in any camp, we can throw out the question and the answer will come back through collective intelligence. The fourth is that we're asking people to share 10 euros per month. Now, individually, this is sort of symbolic because it's 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks. So if you have the ability to share the equivalent of 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks per month, you should do it. And if 1 million people do that, that's 120 million euros per year. So just think about this. Do we want to restore the earth? Do we think we can do it alone? Do we need to join together? So how do we do that? So this is a methodology that can allow us to do that. And it's a methodology that's connected to all of the developments of restoration since about 25 years ago. And there's others going on, but I think the ecosystem restoration camps is the one I like because it empowers people to do it. And the fifth thing is this mycelial network, that we need to act as a species on a planetary scale. And so any breakthrough that happens anywhere needs to transfer throughout this network to everybody so that it's immediately understood. So what we see happening is a tremendous potentiality. And what we've seen happen is that people will take this, they're empowered, and they will do things. And if they're not empowered and they're not engaged in this, what are they doing? They're not doing this. So we need to make sure that millions and potentially billions of people have somewhere to go and something to do. And from the very first moment that they enter the camp, they're sequestering carbon. That day, they can grow soils, they can propagate and plant out, and they can help to infiltrate and retain moisture. So, in my thinking, until I had this thought about the camps, I couldn't see how we could do what we need to do in the amount of time we have. But now, I see it. We just now have to do it. So if we have this opportunity and we don't take this opportunity, I think that's a huge mistake. But if we do take this, yeah, that's flat Earth. We need to go to round Earth right now. You done? Okay. Somebody's up. You're switched already?
Wait, Leo. Right. Oh, never mind. Back. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, good. Sure. I don't know. This one off.
Hannah? Is Hannah in reach?
It's okay. That's actually part of the beginning of it. So, this is connected, but this is, how long is this? This is pretty long. That's pretty long, isn't it? Oh, we could do this. I'm gonna try to do this.
Yeah. All right, everybody, if we could come back to our seats, that would be so fabulous. Thank you, thank you. So we're also really lucky. Now let's go into, where are we on our U? We had some presencing. Let's talk about the co-creating and co-creating these eco camps, because don't waste a great disaster. Let's look to Butte County and see how we can really come together and help with the restoration. And Matt has been doing such amazing work out there, and now it's our chance to come see how we can help support him. And I think it's so appropriate. We celebrated his birthday last night. Who else would have been born on the spring equinox? So let's give another round of applause for Matt and really enjoy what he has to say.
Hi, everybody. Before I start, I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful and humbled by being here and being in front of you guys today. So thank you for every one of you coming and supporting this great work of our time and the energy putting towards that. My name is Matthew Trum, and I'm from Butte County, Oroville, California, to be exact. I'm just going to go really quick through a little background of myself, and then I'm going to try to get into the really important stuff. So I was born in the Bay Area, actually, Concord, East Bay, and I was totally not connected to any of this world back then. I was actually a DJ since I was 13, a hip-hop DJ, and I rap, and I go around and we did a lot of shows. I managed bands and all this kind of stuff. Got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid. Getting in all kinds of mischief. Disconnected. Like searching for something. Didn't really know what it was. I'm getting a little closer to understanding that. So I moved to Butte County about 12 years ago. This is a map of the Plumas National Forest, just to show you how massive that is. Oroville, where I'm at, here's Lake Oroville right here, and so Oroville's down here. And so I moved there first, in Chico for a little bit, and then I ended up in the mountains here, a place called Berry Creek, which is in between Oroville and Quincy. And this is a large map of the place I was at. It was off-grid. My family had property up there since I was a little kid, and I had the opportunity when I was 25 to go out there and live. And it was 12 acres off-grid. A lot of learning lessons. At the time, I was kind of like a prepper, like that was I was like, F the government, and, I'm going to go up in the woods and, cut my piece out of land and, be self-sufficient, right? So part of that was, learning how to grow your own food, right? So I started dabbling with that, failed miserably the first couple of years, not really knowing a lot, always organic, but kind of just figuring it out. But about a year in, what happened was, and I don't know if you can see this, but there's this square here that you'll see. There's 20-acre property above me, and the people who own the property never actually lived there. They bought it, and then they sold all the trees. And so they massively clear-cut this property, which I didn't even know was like a thing. Maybe they don't even consider that 20 acres clear-cut. I don't know. But it was really horrible. And what I got to experience the first couple years was wind that I've never experienced before, erosion. In fact, what you can see in this picture is the water lines here that go right down to my property and basically washed out my entire driveway and all this stuff. So I had a really close experience of what it's like when you remove ecosystems and how the climatic energies start to increase, and you start to see that. And I also got to see the regrowth and what that looks like. So this was the little beginnings of my gardening up there. Then I read this book. How many people here have read this book? Yeah, right? So talking about energy orders, it's amazing what writing a book can do. And it's influenced me and a whole bunch of people I know that got into permaculture. So One Straw Revolution, highly recommend it. Mesabana Fukioa, this natural gardening method, the kind of do nothing, or he calls it, or lazy gardening. It's really not lazy. It's about thinking about nature and the cycles and timing and these kinds of things. And so I started playing around with forest gardening and these styles of things. And then I heard this word permaculture, and started researching more and like food forests and And I met Jeff Lawton back in 2014, and then I got my design certificate in 2015, and kind of started right into it. As soon as I heard about all this stuff and I started seeing it work, I was just telling everybody I knew about it, oh, you got to know about this, and this is amazing, it works, it's really fun. And so I was starting to teach right away, because it was just I wanted to share that knowledge. We got a grant for the school up in the mountains where I lived for a food forest and putting a school garden back in, and and it was really great implementing some of these designs. This is a little design of the school garden. And then they canceled my project because we got the school garden. I was way too ambitious. We got the school garden going, and then the food forest that was in the park, we did all the mainframe, earthworks and cover crops, and we were about to plant our trees. We planted our ceremonial tree, but then the local council was like, wait, this is tripping hazards, and we've got cover crops, what is that? You got weeds everywhere, this is horrible, and then they shut me down. We actually were 1 week away from having our second year rally, and bringing all these people in to get new volunteers and all this stuff, and they shut my project down. We had $2,000 left in our budget, out the window. I was really pissed. Actually, I wanted to go out, the whole community was like, you want us to get out there and yell at them at the meeting? And I was like, yeah, let's not do that. And I had to kind of, step back and say, you know what, let's just thank them for the opportunity, let's move forward. And so I did that, and in the crowd was this gal here on my left in this picture, Elaine Ingham. And she had been following me, I guess, up in Berry Creek, because she just bought property up there, 5 minutes up the road from my house, which was really cool. And she invited me to be her first hire on the property and do the design of the land, and taught me all her composting techniques and all this stuff. And I was able to work with Penny Livingston is the one on my left, or my right, your left. And so I got to work with Penny and get to know her, and it was just a really great experience. That brought me into the world of composting, and then I started composting like crazy, out of control, all right? And fast forward, I moved to Oroville. So I was off-grid, right? I was up in the mountains, this whole off-grid thing. And I saw a talk by Toby Hemingway, actually, in Sacramento at Soil-Born Farms. And it was on the book he just put out called Permaculture Cities. And he was talking about his story about living off-grid and all these things, but he wasn't connected to the community. He wasn't, there was a lot of energy disorder, but living on the mountain and such. And it just so happened that my daughter and her mom, we aren't together, but she moved a little further away. And so it was like that one little thing that moved me. So I just saw that talk with Toby, and then he passed away. And then I got a call from Soil-Born Farms, would you like to fill some of these roles here? Because Toby was here, and how would you like to teach these classes? And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. I felt like Toby was speaking to me. This house came up, for sale down in Oroville, and I was like, okay, I got to go down. I'm being called down to into the town. So I got this house, this blank pallet, 3rd acre, totally different situation, 12 acres, to a third of an acre. And, I felt like a dog in a cage at first, but I was like, challenges are always good. So here's a little, it was just total blank pallet, weeds, everywhere. So I started collecting food scraps, went to the local restaurants. I'm going to go fast through this. Started getting this every couple days, composting like crazy. This is a yard that I got given to me because I had like 5 compost bins going. I had all my friends like helping me turn compost. We were going crazy. Here we are turning some compost. So we started teaching classes on compost there. We started. The point was that we got this yard to like do it because this guy said, "Hey, I've got this empty yard. Why don't you use it?" And so we started making compost en masse, teaching workshops. Here's a few months after starting the backyard, getting our cover crops down, et cetera, et cetera. That's about a year later. Taught my first PDC down there, made a classroom in my living room. Just kept teaching. I've taught 3 courses now down there. Graduated a bunch of really great people. And there's about a year and a half into it in the backyard. And then, we started, we said, well, we're pulling all these weeds and they're worth money and we should probably start a nursery. So we started a nursery. There's about 2 years later. And so we had a demonstration site. So in 3 years from not knowing anybody, it was just my 3-year anniversary being down there. We've got a nursery. We've got, a whole community of people. We've got 9 members of the permaculture group that we started in the area. There was nobody there before, like that we knew of. We've got 2 school garden programs going in the area that we started. We've got a co-op CSA box program. We had a farmer's market, on and on and on. Basically, full income. I gave 5 of my friends full-time work since I started down there. This stuff works, and that's my main point. But it was really weird because it put me in this interesting position when this happened. And it was like everything that I had been doing for the last 7 years had all come to this point. And so, if you guys don't know, that's a picture of the campfire that happened up in Paradise area. And so, my daughter actually moved to Paradise about a year before the fire with her mom, and I dropped her off at school that morning. And at like 8:30, a half hour after I dropped her off, they had to be evacuated. And I didn't know where she was. I had no contact with her for over an hour, and it was just one of the most horrifying experiences as a parent, not knowing what's happening with your kid and knowing that this is happening. And a week before this, I met John. Actually, by chance, we were, messaging each other on Facebook, and ended up having a 2-hour FaceTime conversation. And John invited me to be part of this council, which he said was going to be happening in February. Well, it ended up March, but and I started really researching the ecosystem restoration camps a lot. And a week later, the fire happened. And I remember because we got evacuated Paradise and then Berry Creek, which was my home. My buddy, I put him up there, and then he had to be evacuated again after he already lost his house over here. And then he came down to my house in Oroville, and then we got evacuated from Oroville because the fire was so big and spreading. And so I was leaving Oroville, and and something hit me because I watched a video of John's when I was researching, and one of the things that he said in talking about ecosystem restoration camps was, let's gather around the campfire and restore Paradise. And it was like something hit me like a bolt of lightning, and chills all my my body. And I called John, and I think he said he accidentally answered the phone, and then we were talking. I said, John, this is it. paradise. We lost paradise. Like this is the one, right? So it's been my mission ever since to work on taking my skills to restore the area, because as Fukio said, if we throw Mother Nature out the window, she comes back in the door with a pitchfork. Yeah. So, the biggest thing is that we've disconnected ourselves from nature, and we see it as this thing, people see it as this thing that's out there, that's separate from us. And we call somebody every time nature gets inconvenient for us, and what people have to realize is that we are nature, we are part of nature, and we have to do this. But this is nothing new, right? We have to tap into the indigenous knowledge, and the ways that people maintain the earth, for so long. This is an amazing book. If I highly recommend everybody in this room to check out if you haven't, telling about how they tended the wild here in California. It's systems thinking. So here's our mission. So to support private landowners and land and human habitat restoration, technical material, physical, financial education and demonstration. So what we did is we started setting up staging areas immediately. I put out a video on Facebook, and John helped share it too, and it just went viral, and all these people started contacting me. Hundreds of people in the area, experts in all different fields, started contacting me. We were able to get 2,800 rice straw bales donated from a rice farmer we called. We were able to get like 1,000 wattles donated from the Cal OES. We got wood chips reallocated from what was going to the cogeneration plants, seeds, on and on and on. Goals in the future here, bioremediation, etc. So we're having work parties. We got into the canyons and started laying out wattles, teaching people how to use those. The number one thing that we were focusing on is the toxins, because that's the thing we can't get back, right? Like we can build soils. We're really good at all this stuff, but it's really hard for us to clean up massive amounts of toxins in the environment. So it's like thinking about best practices and such. So, here's us laying out wattles around a burnt out house up there. I don't have a lot of time. So, but yeah, erosion control, and, using materials that are already there. So we're right now in stage 2, education demonstration. So we've been forming committees, to create these workshops, right? So we've had all these people contact us, and I'm looking at all these wonderful, amazing people here. So if you have skills, if you're an educator, you want to come to our area, we want to make Paradise the ultimate expo for alternative sustainable design models for rebuilding human habitat, to recreate a new human story. And we've been given the full go-ahead by the county. Basically, we've got all kinds of amazing things that are happening out there. Title 25 allows alternative sustainable building models, and for up to 5 years right now. So, in the unincorporated areas, I've basically been given full go-ahead to create these demonstration sites for every kind of thing we can imagine. That we've all wanted to do. Composting toilets, natural building, gray water systems, all this stuff, okay? So, yeah, it's huge, right? So, that's what we're doing, and guess what? We're gonna have the very first camp April 26th, and we're inviting all of you out, okay? So, we've basically, okay, thank you. I'm going to wrap it up here, but we've got a place. I'd love to share more with you guys on the sidelines. We've got a place right outside the burn zone, beautiful property that we're going to be at. We're gathering. It started from UC Stanford, contacted us and said we have the alumni that wants to come out and do an action day. They want to support your project. I said, awesome. We're going to plant a bunch of trees. We're going to go to a school. There's the last school in the burn zone that's actually in session. So they're literally surrounded by burned out homes, and they go there every day. trauma, like it's really serious stuff. So we've got permission from the school. We're going to be putting a school garden in for the school there to provide therapy for the kids that have been through this trauma and create the conversations for this restoration work that needs to happen. So it's going to be awesome. So I need help. We're doing planning right now. I'm here to collect best practices from everybody, resources, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a powerful thing because it's a place where people that have things can relate to people who lost. And that's important because the people that are perpetuating the most damage on the planet are those people, right? That have things that can relate to that. That's why Paradise is so important. And I mean, the name, right? I mean, the symbol of it is huge. So I invite all you to come out. So with that, I can talk a lot more about this, but I'd like to take any questions that people might have here tonight. So thank you. Rally. Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, so he asked, so what are you doing? Are you putting out like check dams and things to slow the water, et cetera? Yeah, so we're going to be doing a lot of different demonstration models. Obviously, we know the name of the game is we call it Leave It and Beaver. Call them leaves because you're supposed to leave them, right? Like organic matter is supposed to be on the ground. Think like a beaver. Slow and sink water into the landscape. This is really, really important. So, we're trying to use things that are already there. So the main thing is like the companies that are out there logging right now, and they're taking these massive amounts of, Necromass, and they're moving it with biomass attached and moving it off the mountain to cogeneration plants and et cetera. So we're trying to keep all the organic matter out there. And we need to have interesting and unique ways to work with these companies to be able to pay them to keep the stuff on the land because they're not getting very much for this removal. So that's a big one. All the organic matter, keeping it, and then obviously like doing what we can with the things that are there. Like how can we lay trees out on contour just to slow down, some of this stuff coming out. Everything we can do, and each property that we have, we have about 50 properties that people have signed up to do demonstrations on, different demonstration models on. So each one will have its own unique characteristics, right? So, yeah. Okay, so two questions. Tiny houses, are you going to be building them on sites? Yes. We're working with people like Miguel Elliott and Brendan over here, wherever you are. We've got a shelter committee now, so they've actually had 2 workshops already for the local community. First, a lot of people in the area never even heard of these type of homes, and actually the fire department was with me on a panel. And when I was talking about these types of homes, they were all shaking their heads. And I went to them after, and I was like, yeah, you guys know what's up with that, huh? And they're like, yeah, we've seen these houses actually live through fire. And they said, if you build it, we'll burn it and test it for you. And I was like, yeah, sweet. And then last question was funding. We've been doing this really grassroots to start off with. It was like a GoFundMe for me at first, and then Hannah from Abundant Earth Foundation, which Penny linked me up with Hannah. I called Penny and I said, this is what I'm doing. She said, you need to talk to these guys. So now donations are going through Abundant Earth. They're our fiscal sponsor. But we're basically about to be applying for this whole series of grants. The National Resource Conservation District is one of our partners, including Fish and Wildlife and a bunch of other groups. And they just got a grant to help write grants, to help teach people to write grants. So next Sunday, we're having a planning meeting for this. She's doing a presentation, and then we're going to plan a grant writing meeting where we're all going to sit together, all the people that have projects in the area, and we're going to just write a bunch of grants all together in one room. And I think this is a really great model. I think this is what we all need to do for different projects, is just sit, because if we have 20 people write grants, you know, and half of them get written, we're still all going to work, you know what I mean? So it's really important. Yes. Okay. In the back. Yeah, right here. Yes, sir. Yeah, so there is a group that's tasked with the rebuilding, redesigning. It's kind of more the mainstream like version of what we're doing, but they are open. But what would be really helpful if we had a huge group of people like this come to their meetings. And we're doing that more and more. It's really identifying who are the people in the area. Because the hard thing about disaster is that everybody's scattered and everybody's super drained, and it's not a good representation of what's happening. So we've created that space by having these community meetings and such. This is I wanted to just show. Here's the page. We started two. This is the Campfire Restoration Project website. It gives. You guys changed it already? I'm sorry. What's that? Oh. Drag it over.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, look at that. Okay. I don't know what happened there.
And we'll put your website on the resource board so people know about the event.
Okay.
You can make it a full screen.
Yeah, okay. I see I'm not a Mac guy here.
Just read it.
Let me just, okay. Anyways, this is
CampfireRestorationProject.org.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. I just want to show you. Yeah, and rebuildingparadise.com is our other affiliated site. So you can actually RSVP here for the camp weekend. We're doing 100 people at the camp. 100 people. We're working out the logistics right now. We've got a ton of demonstration sites in the area, including like a 5-acre food forest this guy planted 1,000 trees in 4 years. Like amazing things to see in the area. Really great resources. Did I answer your question? Okay, so yeah, there's a big planning meeting, but we're not trying to be unrealistic of what we can accomplish. You know, what we really want to have is we're collecting data. We're figuring out best practices. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We're partnering with people, and actually, I like to say that. So we partner with Ryan. Are you here, Ryan Rising? He's in the back here. So I'm working with Ryan. Is actually consulting us on the camps. Ryan has been part of the Permaculture Action Network, who's done a ton of work across the country. So again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're wanting to work with you, but I'm trying to get to the nitty gritty. That's one of the things I'm here for. Is like, how many toilets? What kind? Food trucks, tool trucks. Like, let's get to the real stuff here. Let's get it done. Let's do this, right? So, yeah. My goal is to come here with an action item for everybody and say, like, all right, here we go. Let's go with this. Let's start somewhere. So, thank you guys so much. Hope to be there with you.
Why we're here, to plant these seeds and keep it moving. So now let's journey in our you to the co-evolving. How do we really take this? How do we really get inspired and move out to the rest of the world? And so, as I mentioned, we're lucky to have Michael Nichols here down from Vancouver Island area to talk about the great work he's doing around the world. So, Michael, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Nichols. I first want to start off by just saying thank you for allowing us to all be in your traditional area of the Matsun Ohlone peoples. I really appreciate everyone here being in this room as well, and to the Paicines farm for allowing us to be here. I think I said that name wrong, but thank you to everybody to be here. My story starts with my family here, and I'm just going to give a sort of very personal story of what I've been doing over the last 30 years, and the story is mostly of my travels around the world doing permaculture restoration work. And so it all starts with basically teaching the youth. These are my two daughters here on the small ones there, and a young student from Ontario, and my wife Heidi, and our dog. And so it's about teaching the youth about planting trees, because I honestly believe that the solution to the world's problems really lies in planting trees, because we have to absorb that CO2. That's the beginning. I mean, that's just the first step of transformation. So, of course, like Matthew had explained, the swales are very important to capture the water, hold the water. John has mentioned that too. That's absolutely critical. Water is also the absolute foundation of all life. And so we have to start by capturing the water. And then in this particular case, that was a strawberry field, but that's what we do on large scales in the environment as well. So my journey took me to East Africa. In 1990 was the first year I went there, and I went over as a tourist, and after lying on the beach and going to safari for a couple of weeks, I just thought, as we're traveling to all these locations, I just see desertification all over the place. I see landslides, I see brown rivers running, and I see slash and burn agriculture everywhere, and I just thought, I am not spending my time on the beach. I am going to get to work. So I started tree nurseries, and I did tree nurseries for about 15 years with schools all over the country, and with government organizations, and with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Wildlife of Kenya. And after doing that for a while, I thought, I need to actually take this to the school level on a larger scale. And then I got invited by somebody to do a food garden for a school in Western Kenya. So the beginning of all of our projects was always starting a tree nursery, and I would, after the first one or two schools, that was sort of the foundation that that each school had to apply to, is we had to see, are you able to actually take care of this project? Because I don't want to do a project, spend all this money, and then it all fall apart. And so we said, if we build a tree nursery with you, and you maintain the tree nursery, and we come back and the nursery is alive and the trees have gone out and been planted, then we'll work with you. So that was the way we started working. So we got the youth into collecting seeds in the local area. We provided the seed packets. The soil was brought in by all the students from their local farms. And then we made compost, and then we planted up the bags and filled in with seeds to be planted out at their schools and in the local environment as well. Then we took each school that we worked with, and most schools were between 5 to 8 acres of land. And basically in a 3-week period, we would completely take out all the grasses. We would plant thousands of trees, often 10,000 trees at a go. The fence line all the way around the school would be done. Then we would plant ornamental trees throughout. Most of them were food-producing trees. Windbreak trees as well, just to reduce the wind, build up the soil, collect the CO2, be able to make compost out of the leaves in the future. Water collection, of course, was vital, and this is just one form of water collection, so that we use that water for hand washing, and after the hand washing, then it was used to water the trees. then we did, this large-scale taking out all the grass and putting it into food. And we were trying to teach that maize. We never planted any maize because that's the traditional food of all the people in East Africa. It's not the traditional food, it's the imported version of food, which it is not food. It's basically what we would call cattle grain here, and then they grind that up and just eat that as a gruel, and it really has no nutrient and no food for the brain. And these schools were doing very poorly academically, so we thought if we introduce really good food, tons of vegetables and lots of fruits and stuff like that, then these kids are going to actually get a proper diet. So it was in the children's best interest to work on the land, create this food source. Then all the food was cooked. Then they would get a daily lunch, because a lot of kids in East Africa never even get a proper meal at all, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. So this was highly important, and we saw that school after school was going from very, very poor grades academically to incredible grades. In fact, the first school we did went from 64th place out of 64 schools. It was the worst school in the neighborhood or in the entire district, and then it went to number one school. Then we started to, after I did 7 schools, because our farm is called Seven Ravens, so I did 7 schools for 7 ravens. And then the school that I have is a school in Canada. It's a permaculture and ecoforestry school, and we take students from all over the world. We teach them their 6-week courses, and then there's 2-month courses. And the 2-month course goes to Africa every year, and then we spend 1 month on Salt Spring learning all about permaculture and doing it, working in the community. And then the next month was in Africa, putting in an installation. So this is one of the installations. This became our first teacher training center, because after the 7 schools, there were lots of problems with the schools, because everyone of the schools saw that, this is Michael, he's coming in to do this project, it's his project. So it's very difficult to kind of make it their project. And so I decided, okay, I don't want to be the guy always bringing the money, raising the money, and doing all the projects, and then they work for 2 or 3 years, and then they slowly start to fizzle out. The most incredible aspect of the failures was that they were failures at the school level, because the principal would often corrupt the project. But on the home level, where the kids had actually learned these skills and they took them home, the areas were really changing. The kids, that was the most incredible thing. And a filmmaker came with me one year, and he said, "Have you followed any of these kids home?" I said, "No." He said, "I'll take you for a tour tomorrow. You're gonna shed some tears." And we saw one farm in particular, I'll just mention, 7 acres of land this family farm had. They were making $200 a year off 7 acres of land, growing mostly maize. Everyone was in ripped up trousers. They were an incredibly poor family. I mean, holes in the roof, just the worst situation possible. Within 1 year, it was a $20,000 a year income. The one boy who had attended was at the school. He took all the information home and said, "Mom, Dad, and everyone in the family here, we have to change. There's a much better way of farming than what we're doing traditionally." So, and it all starts with capturing water. It starts with planting trees. And so then they set up a tree nursery. They set up fish farming. They collected all the water, and they always had a lack of water. Now they had an abundance of water. This guy was so clever. When the first heavy rain came and it blew out part of the fish pond, he said, and they lost all the fish. Then he said, "Okay, next time we do this, we're going to," he went to all the neighbors and said, "Give me all your old mosquito nets." He made a fence out of it, and then the water was able to pass through the mosquito net fence, and the fish stayed in, and they didn't lose the pond. And that was one story, and there were many stories that we looked at. So the knowledge went to the kids took it home, and they really applied it. And so even on the school level, if it failed, it was not a failure. But then I decided that I really wanted to get into starting teacher training centers. So our goal was to set up 5 teacher training centers throughout East Africa, in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we did accomplish this. And So those have now, the project is going to train 2.5 million kids by 2022 and in permaculture. And it's training basically 200 teachers a year, or 1,000 teachers, because there's 5 schools a year, and those 1,000 teachers, they teach 700,000 kids a year in permaculture. So that last picture was just about water, holding water back. So here's another picture of just on that same institute in Kenya, about bringing the, holding the water. This is a tiny little fish pond. Well, it's not that tiny, it's actually quite big, but it looks small. There's plants all the way around it. All that vegetation falls into the water, it attracts bugs. The bugs fall in the water, the fish eat that, and then the nutrient-rich water is used back in the farm. Okay. Here's a slightly larger scale. I was hired by a mining company in East Africa, Tanzanite, and they had 600 employees, and they were spending a lot of money on food, and by the time the food got there, it was mostly rotten. So they said, can you grow us food locally? And I said, yes, sure, we can do that. So again, there's a huge hill up here, and this was a major water harvesting system. So as the water comes rushing down the hill and off down to the river and to the ocean, we actually were able to capture it through these massive swales. And then we put in irrigation too for the times that we didn't have that water. Next. So this is after rain, and immediately the swales started to fill and life started to come back into the land. This was a completely degraded piece of land, and now there's a huge amount of food being produced there. So here's a picture of some of the food. Next. This is a similar kind of project in China that we did. This is ended up being a road to a massive dam that we built at the other end. All the water drained to that dam, and the dam was filled after a couple of rains. This is the road a couple of weeks later. And that this whole property was then grown into alfalfa as a mulch, so that we would capture that as for our composting, and then into carrots as a cash crop, and then into 60 different species of indigenous Chinese trees, because when I was in China, I noticed that most of the trees were exotics from Canada, and that I really wanted to see the Chinese have their own Chinese trees back again. So here we are planting one of the 60 species. This guy here on the left is from Kenya, and I've taken him all over the world to help me with these projects. His name is Patrick Mwangi. Yeah. So here is, John has obviously seen a lot of this work, and this is the kind of work that we're talking about doing, and this is the kind of work that I actually see needs to happen in California as well. Maybe not quite as intensively. I think the swales could be much further apart. But this is their answer. This is just outside of Beijing, leaving to the north, and every single one of those lines there is a terrace made by hand of millions of people going up into the hills and carving that out of the stone there, and then planting that into vegetation. And you can see, this is in the middle of winter, this is in January, and it's dry there, but you can see there's vegetation everywhere. So I passed back through there a couple of months later in the summer. There's the Great Wall of China at the very top. And you can see in the summer, it's all green now. And this was a complete desert before. Next. This is our project in Kenya. I've been working at this place for about 20 years. So you can see everything around is like big agricultural fields of maize and stuff like that. There were a few dotted trees around on the periphery. And this is our permaculture center in Kenya, where we've started doing a lot of projects. And you can see all the reforestation that's happening there. A project in Tanzania at a school where we took 1 hectare of land, which is about 2.5 acres, and started off with a tractor because we just thought it was so hard that we thought we would try to break up the ground a little bit. Next. Then we got all the kids out there plowing up the land together with a whole bunch of Canadian volunteers, making compost everywhere. Then the water redirection from all the buildings up there, because there was such a flooding issue, it all went down to the river. We thought we would capture it, so it's just redirecting the water all over the place. Then building the terraces for growing the food, and then the compost everywhere, the planting of the seeds by the kids, vegetables, that's 1 week later. And again, another shot. Go on. And now I want to take it back to sort of the Canadian, American, Californian aspect. So water retention. And water retention doesn't only have to be in big swales and stuff like that, but a simple little log across a hill there. You can see how the snow, this was just, we had a snowfall there, and I just wanted to take this picture to show you how a little barrier will hold water, and it'll infiltrate that water. So in the forest scenario, especially in all the forests in California, be really great to start employing people to thin those out, thin out the dead trees, lay them across the contour, cut them up and brush them up into swales, and let that start the work, because then the mycelium will spread too, the animals will develop, more trees will come in, go in. So here's another picture of the same kind of scenario. You can see there's 2 terraces of logs there, and that's holding back all that water. Here's a picture of my own farm where there's a pond up here. It's then draining down to a swale right here, and that then drains down to the next pond. We have now 7 ponds on this land, and that then drains down to the next one. Here's a larger scale kind of water harvesting system with swales, potatoes, vegetables in between. That's on another farm. It all comes down in the end to holding the water and then having the water available for fire. And this is the one thing I'm just going to wrap up now, but we want to hold that water, and the project that we're really thinking of, and this would be very applicable to California, is building thousands, hundreds of thousands of ponds, swales to infiltrate the water to recharge the bottom valleys, and ponds all over the place to hold the water, to create fish farming, to create hydroelectricity, and then to create the opportunity for all that water to be going to the main roads where there's fire hydrants, so that when there's a fire, there's an abundance of water to put it out. And, you know, just you can go through these. These are just, and so to combat water stability threats, Singapore has focused its attention on stormwater optimization. I also don't really see that happening in California. That has to happen. There's so much concrete here. And if we can bring all that water into collection points and then redistribute it and soak it back in farmers' fields. So here's a picture of that. This is probably one of the most important points, and we're at the end now. I think that we have to reconstruct. Everything is changing. The climate is changing dramatically, and we have to think of a new way of protecting our towns. So we should continue maintaining indigenous forests, very important. But around towns, let's protect our towns with trees that don't burn. And so one of the trees is poplar, and there are many other different species of trees that you can plant around towns, but they're mostly hardwood, they're leafy trees that do not burn. And then as the fire rages towards the town, at least the towns are protected. I think there's another picture of that same fire that went through, but the whole settlement got protected there. And this is all coming back. This is sort of when we're talking about presence and feeling and all that kind of stuff. This is the feeling I want to leave you with, is the forest at my place, but that feeling of moisture, the feeling of life. If there's any questions. Their first steps would be planting trees. Planting trees and getting the trees back up there, and creating swales and keeping the moisture in the land and not letting it be so dry, because like John said before, we've heard that also from Matthew, it's the dry lands that create the winds that dry out places faster. So as soon as they're reforested, then that stops that cycle. What's that? Yeah, there's many different species that can live in that kind of climate. Yeah, mangroves, there's casuarinas, palms, all kinds of trees. Yes, John?
Can you imagine leading like hundreds of thousands of people to do what you've done in the next, say, 10 years?
Absolutely. Yeah. John asked if I could imagine leading 100,000 people over the next 10 years. to do this kind of work worldwide. And for sure, it's my passion to do this. We are really trying. I'm just going to give you a quick little story. I'm always desperately thinking, what can I do next? What's the next thing? And so I thought you've all heard of these kids in Europe going on strike at schools. Well, it's spreading all over the world now, and I thought, well, that's a great idea, and that's really telling the government, that these kids are concerned. But I thought, okay, kids, on that day of striking, let's go and do something positive. So I said, let's, at our school, where my kids go, we're starting a project next week, and we're going to do a tree nursery there, and 3 trees for every single kid. And then every single class is going to write out to 10 more schools around the world. And then those schools are then going to copy the same thing and write out to 10 more at each. And within 3 cycles, you get 2 billion trees in the ground. So I think that's pretty fast action. And that's starting next week. And I'm sure that some of the schools in America, I certainly want anybody here who has an address of a school, they'd like to participate, please give it to me, because I'll give it to the kids to connect with your schools. And that will be just the beginning. The kids will just start with this, and then they'll take it to another level. Next year they'll say, let's do something about the water, let's do something about whatever. They'll take it to the next steps. Okay. All right. Thank you.
To get to walk through a forest with Michael is so amazing because he really speaks the language of trees, and that's something we can all learn and spread. And yeah, let's use the children to incorporate this restoration work. And speaking of supporting local restorations and supporting the ranch here, Paicines, where we're at, those who would like to purchase anything from them, especially the lamb that has been raised here regeneratively, they are asking that we fill out the order forms on the table here and I guess get those back to me so I can turn them in today so the order is ready for you when you leave tomorrow. Real quick question on that? I'm not quite sure if it's frozen. It's packaged and ready. It's frozen so that you can get it back home and you'll be all set. And no, it's small orders. You can also do large orders. So if you just want some to bring home to your family for tomorrow night's dinner or whenever it's thawed out, check it out. There's forms on the table here. And last question on this. Okay, so the question is, how can we all become members of the Ecosystem Restoration Camp, make our donations, our monthly donations, so that we can really fund this movement? And Erin, come talk to Erin, and we should all leave as members. We can all donate a little bit to make this really happen.
All right, so let's hear it again. One more round of applause for our 4 storytellers this morning. Wonderful. So hopefully we were observing, we were opening our senses to those stories. We were following the seeds of inspiration, of possibility for here, for us. We're now going to move into lunch where we'll open our senses to the beautiful food that's prepared for us. And then after lunch, we're going to go into the bottom of the U. We're going to go into presencing. We're going to go into some time where we're leaving the head and the stories and the words and all of that, and we're going to drop into silence together, and we're going to spend some time outdoors. So we'll have this next hour for lunch, and then after lunch, please gather right outside these doors in a circle. We're going to begin right at 1:30 and be dressed to be outdoors for an hour. You don't need to bring anything with you, just yourself. For lunch, please exit through these doors, wrap around, and lunch will be provided on the back area right here under the awning. I'll see you at 1:30 right out here on the gravel. Thank you.